You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Batuta Advocate, on Desert Rock FM. Welcome back to the Batuta Advocate radio show, recording live here in downtown Batuta, Budgie Smuggler Studios in the Old City District. You're joined today by myself, Clancy Overall, editor of the Batuta Advocate, and of course, Errol Parker, editor-at-large. A bit going on in Queensland this week. They've been able to neutralise the cluster, they think, down there in South Brisbane. And Palaszczuk has announced that Queensland Brisbane more specifically, will be holding the AFL Grand Final. What is it? Maybe a week after the state election?
Yeah.
30,000 people capacity. First time it's ever left the MCG. There'll be a lot of filthy members of the Melbourne Cricket Club right now, I imagine.
There's only going to be about 4 or 5 blokes down the Pineapple down there in Brisbane.
Yeah.
Who are keen for this contest, but, you know.
I mean, I reckon there'll be some dribblers, depending on which team get in, there'll be dribblers that'll be coming up and isolating for 2 weeks just to watch the fucking thing.
I don't think that Queenslanders are bandwagon fans.
Unless the Lions have won 3 premierships in a row and look like they're getting a 4th, then that's when Queenslanders jump into AFL. But today we're speaking to a journalist who's been writing a lot about, the cultural differences between the Sunshine State, people from up our way, and of course the Southerners, and the differences in games that we play and our politics, and that is Lech Blaine. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey guys, great to be here.
It's good to see some, aside from our esteemed organ, some rural Queenslanders flying the flag for journalism, independent journalism in Australia. Mm-hmm. Now, where are you writing at the moment?
Writing for The Monthly, who are based out of Melbourne, and owned by a great man, Maury Swartz. Mm-hmm. So, it's one of the last bastions of independent journalism in Australia. You
wrote an article, it was titled The Art of the Class War, about Peter V'landys and how he's managed to provide a blueprint for all Australian sport to get back on this year. With something like that, where you obviously can talk the talk, Lech is a rural Queenslander who knows you obviously know your league. How do you pitch that to a Melbourne newspaper?
I pitched it originally, and my editor Nick Fike. This is after V'landys had done his press conference and said, "We're going to get back on," and I was like, all in. I was like, "Oh, this is going to be like a great story," because my gut instinct was, having been following him for a little bit, was he's actually going to pull it off. Yeah. Like I didn't think that he was full of shit. I thought that it was legit. Yeah. Whereas, I think originally Nick was like most people thought, this is
just some loudmouth
this
league administrator,
piss and wind from some guy in Sydney. And then so as the weeks sort of went past and V'landys was just generating so much publicity, I think that it's sort of become just a bigger story. And then the trick for me was to take it beyond rugby league and sort of look at the cultural issues surrounding rugby league, and that maybe a lot of people in the South don't pay too much attention to, because with the AFL you take for granted it's just a behemoth. You grow up in the southern states and there's not really any other show in town in terms of football. So it was sort of an opportunity to explore some of the stuff happening, but then also tell like a broader story to people who might not have ever really looked into it before.
Did your opinion of Peter V'landys change after you met him and interviewed him?
I spoke to him on the phone, so I didn't actually meet him in person.
You didn't get to eyeball him?
No, I didn't get to eyeball him, so that could have changed things massively.
Height, all these things come into it when you're dealing with such a powerful man.
I know.
Height.
I think we're actually exactly the same height.
Right.
So, because he talks about his height quite frequently. I think he's like 175 centimetres, and so am I. So I know what it's like to be underestimated by
fellow man.
Yeah, by fellow men, and I've been there. I could empathise with the chip on his shoulder that he has about that. But I think originally I thought that I wasn't really going in with any great axe to grind about him, but I was pretty suspicious about not so much his public popularity, but how strong it actually was behind the scenes and how legit he was behind the scenes. And
you start getting worried when you...
I was worried. I was like, surely, especially in rugby league, I think we're so paranoid.
We're used to being led down.
Yeah.
Everyone's used to being led down by their heroes.
So I was like ready, not ready to get let down, but I sort of thought, surely this is a bit of a con job in terms of some of the PR, but the more people that you spoke to who came from completely opposing sides of the various divides in rugby league, they were all, they weren't all totally glowing about him. Some had misgivings about where he'd come from or his tightness with News Limited, for example, but they all seemed to agree that he'd done something which none of the other administrators before him had been able to do, which was to actually just cut through all those divides and sort of provide some strong leadership. So, I mean, there's a long way to go. He's only been there, it feels like 5 years, but he's only been there since the end of last year. But it's a fascinating case study, and behind all the PR puff and the way that he plays the media like a fiddle, there's actually a fair bit of substance in what he's trying to do, I think, for rugby league. Yeah.
It was great to see you also, the way you were able to articulate how much the common man can respect someone like Peter V'landys, and you also, paired that with the elites, and you don't often get to see it in writing, but the Mike Carltons and the Peter Fitzsimons and the Victorian racing executives talking shit about this man and just awakening a sleeping giant is basically what they've done. There will be a time, I'm certain, when Everest is bigger than the Melbourne Cup. I'm 100%. I'm sure of that because
well, it all comes down to money, doesn't it? I mean, the Everest now is the richest turf race in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think in terms of popularity, he has it in him as someone who founded the Everest. In his role with New South Wales Racing. It'll be bigger than the Melbourne Cup. He might even get the public holiday that he's been chasing too.
and I think you underestimate just how important that is for a lot of rugby league fans, and to a certain extent, he plays the PR game. Even just to have someone that makes the effort to make the right noises, and it actually does. And it's probably hard to relate if you come from an AFL background, which has a working class base, but it also has that upper class base. How important it is to have someone that really appeals to those people, because they feel sort of, and it goes right across politics, like. They sort of feel left behind. And, So it's like it's a lot bigger than sport, but he's sort of played into that whole zeitgeist of speaking up for the battler.
So what you're saying is Bill Shorten shouldn't have gone running marathons with his wife leading into an election.
No. Well, I don't know. This is something that I'll flesh out. I'm writing a quarterly essay for next year about leadership and about the sort of persona of the larrikin, and so that we'll look more closely at, because now we've got two federal leaders who are both unabashed rugby league fans. You can wonder how authentic that is for Morrison, but he's certainly
Albo versus ScoMo. It's like they've all got the nicknames.
It's very much a suburban Sydney, and the problem for Albo is that he's probably the most legitimate sporting fan that we've had as a politician. Like he is legit.
He's the type of guy.
He was there. He was there in the trenches during. When South were kicked out, and he was there the whole time. But the problem for him now is that he's coming up against someone who's almost more elbow than elbow. Like ScoMo's sort of like taken this, seen this thing across the aisle and gone like, I need to, I can do this even better. And so I think someone like Elbow would have been a lot more sharper discrepancy if he had have gone up against Turnbull.
Yeah.
But I don't think it will be quite as pronounced. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. It's a weird.
That is true. Albo was doing that before it was even required of a politician. He was wearing a Bundy tie.
Before he even thought that he'd ever potentially be the leader of the party. Like, that was so there is.
In fact, that stuff could have only been a hindrance back in the day when he was hanging around with Russell Crowe and James Packer and shit.
It's the weirdest thing in the world. Like that, like historically, especially over in rugby league, has a better place in Australia than what it does in England, where it's really shit upon by the establishment, and like you used to get banned from playing rugby union forever if you even like were met with rugby league officials. And so the idea of like politicians trying to win elections by like chasing the rugby league fan is so foreign to like anyone's understanding of Australian social history. Like it's totally bizarre that we've gotten to this point where, as trivial as it sounds, I genuinely think that Scott Morrison's avowed support for the Sharks won him so many votes.
Oh, for sure.
In New South Wales and Queensland, especially amongst fans who feel like they get shit upon, like who you'd talk to, and I'd travel around, and they'd say they hate all politicians, but if they're looking for like one thing to like differentiate that might just like lean them towards one person over another. Like that's like his whole election pitch was like, I'm a Sharks fan. It was like,
He said that walking into the Libspill. He said, go the Sharkies.
So how do you think he's been able to cultivate this, because it was only a couple of years ago that he said he was more of a rugby union fan, and he's obviously had help from...
And he was a Western Bulldogs diehard for a while, courtesy of Rodney Eade as well.
He's obviously had the help of the media, but how do you think he's cultivated this image?
Where he is helps him because he's in Sutherland, and so when he got down there, and the Sharks are the local team, the Sharks don't have they're doing better now, but there was a while there when nobody would have touched the Sharks at all. And so they don't have gatekeepers standing around. Like a club like South, if you rocked up and tried to present yourself as the biggest Rabbitohs fan in the world, there'd be a bunch of...
Mike Whitney would get you. Yeah. He'd cut you down.
George Piggins would be ready to tear strips off you, but
and Rusty.
But there's more gatekeepers around it, and so it's the same with the big AFL clubs in Melbourne. There's lots of people around.
You'll get found out.
Who would call you out. But I think the Sharks, because of historically they're one of the newer Sydney teams, they've struggled to attract maybe that popular support. It was probably easier for him to become their number one fan, and they were happy for that to happen.
Yeah, St George was always... Howard and those guys kept that all under wraps, and literally the only person that ScoMo would have had to impress was Eddinghausen, and they're both at Hillsong together, so we're laughing. He's straight in he's number one ticket holder now. Yeah, which actually brings us to the next point. You've written a very interesting, albeit confronting article about the Hillsong Church. It was an essay, that came out this week. This is the most recent article you've done. Tell us a little bit about what you went looking for and what you found within the Hillsong Church and within that culture, that growing community in Australia.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating, because you hear so much buzz about it, and for me, I come from the heartland of evangelical Christianity in Queensland, which is the Darling Downs. So, but you really...
That is a belt, you're right.
Yeah, it's
from Burnett down to the Darling Downs.
Yeah, and I was born in Kingaroy. Really, really sort of followed it around, but you really don't pay much attention to it when you're there. It's not like I'm not a religious person myself, didn't really know much about it. I'd sort of missed a lot of the media about it, then it was obviously coming up a lot more. And so I guess I wasn't trying to... There's been a fair bit done about Hillsong and about Brian Houston, but I sort of just wanted to experience Hillsong and sort of just filter through that. It wasn't all weird. I rocked up to a congregation just near ANZ, the old ANZ Stadium.
All Funds Arena.
No, in Brizzy, out in Mount Gravatt.
Nathan.
So that's like the heartland.
Another belt.
In Brizzy. And so it was just the most laid back, casual, social event. It felt like you're at I felt like I was at a cricket barbecue, just a massive cricket barbecue, and there was BMX riders doing wheelies,
a lot of Islander dance,
really friendly dudes, handshakes all round, I honestly felt like I was more at a sporting breakup than a church congregation, and so I just tried to experience and filter that back and just try and give people an idea of what the experience of those congregations are like, and it was just a really weird timing because of everything happening in Australia with the bushfires, and so the bushfires were literally just taking off in New South Wales, and so I got this commentary about the bushfires, and he wasn't waxing lyrically about them, but this is Houston, and it was just interesting, and I certainly wasn't trying to, because that's one thing that you realise is that it's not like one size fits all. You have this idea that anyone who's Pentecostal, they're signing up for this wholesale theological beliefs, but it's not like that. There's a lot of different people there from completely different walks of life who just happen to have this thing in common, and so. But I just thought it was just interesting because Morrison doesn't talk about his Pentecostalism in public, and I just thought that was a interesting way to just weigh up this phenomenon that lots of people have been talking about and sometimes speculating wrongly about, and just weighing it up and telling the story of the summer and just giving people an idea.
The words you used, which I found were quite interesting, was almost an apocalyptical positivity.
Optimism.
Optimism, yeah.
A guy at the barbecue that I went to on the first night had I don't know whether it was a heart attack or cardiac arrest or something, and I was gobsmacked, and they had ambulances coming and they had doctors helping him and stuff, but I'm just standing there thinking, this is all off or whatever. Like, there's no way they'll keep on going with this. But there was like a few thousand people there, and then the ushers were just like literally, like, anyway, guys, like, carry on, like, come on, let's
praise the Lord.
The show's about to start. Yeah, and they didn't get a mention, and so it's just that idea, and I don't think that's like, it's not like they're airbrushing it consciously, but there's just this real optimism, and they don't want to like kill the buzz or kill the mood. And then once I got down to Sydney, I sort of went out to Western Sydney. I actually signed up for the TV on the internet. And so I started getting these Hillsong packs getting sent to me, which I thought I was getting for free. Unbeknownst to me, I was actually getting bunged $60 a month. So
they're good, mate.
I've kept on getting them. I'm like, how good's this? No wonder so many people are signing up.
Yeah.
And then I finally checked my bank account for the first time in a couple of months, and I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. We, I went out and saw one of those monsters they had out in Western Sydney. We flew down to look at that.
At the old Olympic.
Yeah, the old Olympic. Just wanted to get a good look at that. And one thing that I noticed, which was quite interesting, was, in my opinion, was the noticeable class divide a little bit. With we were hoping to get inside. We wanted to see it in action. We wanted to see the big man on stage.
But we weren't prepared to pay $300.
It was $300
to get inside.
So they would say to us, "Are you paying delegates?" We're like, "Mate, this is fucking church." Like, and it's all advertised in like that it's free.
Yeah.
But they prioritise the paying delegates.
Yeah.
And then
you
stay here if you want to, if there's seats left over to get inside and see this thing
in
Allphones Arena, which is apparently sold out by paying delegates. And they put us all like cattle in the middle of this like waiting area while the paying delegates walk past. And then there's a few seats open up and they let a couple grandmas and a couple wheelchairs go in. And then they herd the rest of us into the non-paying delegate marquees where they're playing a live stream of what's happening inside. And it's just like, so we're with all the... This is where the actual poor people are, and the people who actually, religion's playing a role in their life in the same way it has for so many people in, destitute kind of positions. Whereas I don't know what the fuck the paying delegates are getting out of this. You know what I mean? Other than an empty bank account.
Well, there was a lady in the line there when we were going into the marquee, and she was like, "You look really sad. I think you should try some tongue therapy." I was like, excuse me?
I need more than tongue therapy.
I need to get out of here.
I need to get out of Homebush. That's what needs to happen.
No, there's a talk about like the whole cultural phenomenon, and you wouldn't think that there's really like a through line from like regional Queensland politics to like Hillsong to like rugby league. But and Houston talks about it, about being sort of like shit upon by the mainstream and by the mainstream media, and I think that really feeds into his like his appeal, because a lot of the people who are going are quite humble means. They're getting a lot of like people with a fair bit of money, but a lot of them are your Western Sydney battlers, and so that sort of like plays into that
quite
whole
multicultural, a lot of migrant communities.
Very multicultural and very like in like a very not a tokenistic sort of way either. Like it felt very authentic, like how integrated some of these recent arrivals felt within those congregations. Like it was totally authentic. Like it's hard to take a completely negative view to something that people are getting such meaning from. And then I guess the thing that I sort of like is wonder about is like, you got a guy like Scott Morrison who mentions in every press conference for a year about the Cronulla Sharks, who he's been supporting for how many years?
2007.
Yeah. Or like, and
since pre-selection.
Since Paul Gallen came back from the from the peptide scandal. Like I don't think he'd even fully jumped on before that. And so like, and that's totally fine because he's supporting his local club. That's great. Yeah, the fact that this other part of his life that has to be integral to his life, even if he's not signing up wholesale to every single belief. Yeah. In terms of
he doesn't mention it that much. Doesn't mention it that much.
That's what I mean. Like
it was pretty brave for him to bring the cameras in with him on the campaign trail.
It was that controlled moment, and that like I think that there was a lot of people that thought, oh, that's terrible. Like he's lost the election there, but it actually helped him weirdly with not just the evangelical vote, which is quite sizable in a lot of outer suburban seats, but just with people
belief.
Just like there was this weird thing at the last election where all these people just were so nihilistic about politics and were like, nobody believes in anything. And it was almost, I think that one of the things about his whole persona and the whole larrikin persona, it just created this bit of nostalgia for like like the John Howard nostalgia. Oh yeah, he's a Christian. He loves his sport, and it's like played into that whole the way that Australia used to be. And so he didn't even. It's almost like the nostalgia that you get with like something like Brexit or with Trump, without
misplaced nostalgia,
without having to go to the same degrees of extremism, maybe. But like it appeals to that sense within people of like, who feel like they're losing control of their lives, or they're losing control of their jobs or their finances. Oh, we can go back to how the way things used to be. And so he really evokes that whole sort of early 80s Bob Hawke, Paul Hogan type.
How good.
He sounds like that. And so when Hawke kicked the bucket,
2 days before the election,
like rest his soul, like great man. And everyone sort of went, oh, that's going to, how many percentage points is that going to add to Labor's vote? And that was my assumption as
Everyone
well.
was saying that it was the same shit. Like you're saying, it's like those photos in the Hillsong, taking them into his Assemblies of God's, gathering on the campaign trail. That's not going to help him. Bob Hawke dying is not going to help him. And no one can say anything. No one can predict anything politically anymore. Because I'll tell you what's happening outside of that. We found was like that day he went to church. I was like, oh, he might be in trouble here. As you said, it was a controlled environment, but he still had his eyes rolled back with his hand in the air. And then we go, well, what did Bill Shorten get up to today? Bill Shorten runs a marathon with his wife saying Chloe Shorten's husband. So that's probably worse in terms of appealing to the base. And then that same day, ScoMo takes the cameras from the Hillsong gathering to the Easter show out at Homebush, and he's eating Dagwood dog. He's eating in every press shot outside of church. He's eating and having a schooner, and then he takes them to the Sharks. I mean, that's you can throw a bit of church in there if you want, but that's going to appeal to much more people.
He knows what he's doing, though.
Absolutely, and that's what I mean. They had it with the 2019 election over in Britain, where they had this idea about this Workington man who was like, it was like by a conservative think tank that they needed. This was like the voter that from the north of England who'd always voted for Labor and was going to switch to vote Tory for the first time in their lives. And it actually ended up happening in some of those seats, and which is this weird thing where you've got leaders who you wouldn't think for a million years would appeal to those people. But what Morrison does by embracing these cultural traditions so without any sort of cultural cringe whatsoever is that he's making people feel good about themselves, and he's making people who sometimes, a lot of the time, feel bad about themselves feel good about themselves. And that's like a really powerful thing. And he doesn't even need to do anything with policies to achieve it. Like that's why it's almost like, but he got there by accident because like he got lumped with the leadership. He didn't have much time left, and he was like, this is the only option that I have. And it was actually, it worked. And as much as like you don't want to promote some sort of like race to the bottom in terms of like having two leaders who are trying to outbloke each other, like when you've got electorate that's never been more diverse or progressive in a lot of ways. But a lot of those voters who you talk about through regional Queensland and stuff, that's where you're done, where some of the Shortens like the exercise, and I love running as much as any. Like I'm a marathon runner. I run as often as possible, and I actually look quite a lot like Bill Shorten when I'm running. So I empathise with the guy completely, but like you don't want to tell him to like tone it down because that's like it's a healthy thing or whatever. But that's the sort of thing that like
that doesn't appeal to people who willingly vote for George Christensen.
No. That's like the you talk about like the whole culture war type thing, and
it's not a political statement, but it's just
reality. Like it's just reality, unfortunately. And I think that Albanese will neutralise that to a large extent.
He'll be able to slob it up a bit, you reckon?
Yeah, well, he's
Albo just tweeting from the couch at home. It's funny, that similar thing kind of in Australia as England, as you're saying, there's these seats flipping in the north. People in towns in England that would have literally killed Margaret Thatcher if she walked through town, in the 80s. All those old mining towns, Billy Elliot, all that that kind of part of the world are all flipping a little bit because they got caught up in this Brexit thing, and it's a cultural conservatism as opposed to
massively. And like my old man was from Ipswich. His old man was a blacksmith on the railway, was a trade unionist, vice president of the Queensland Ironworkers Union, and so you have this generational gap where it goes from my grandfather to my dad, who was a small businessman and publican and cab driver, stuck with Labor because he was hardcore because he'd been raised that way. But a lot of the people throughout those areas, they were the ones that actually flipped to One Nation. And it's quite his older brother George, who was like a local absolute rugby league legend in Ipswich. He won the Bulimba Cup the last time they won the Bulimba Cup, and I think like 66.
The Jets?
No, this is before the Jets.
Yeah.
They won the Bulimba Cup. It used to be between Ipswich, Brizzy and Toowoomba.
Yeah.
And so he was a fullback in the Ipswich team. And so he went out and went into business, did really well for himself out of business, was completely different to Dad. He switched sides and went over to the Liberal side.
Yeah.
He ran for them in the 93 election, then got knifed at the pre-selection for Oxley before the next election by Pauline Hanson, who subsequently, she
still ran on a Liberal ticket.
She ran on a Liberal ticket, then eventually had to leave, and that's how One Nation happened. But so
she almost did what Fraser Anning did to her. Like she got in on the Liberal ticket and then immediately formed One Nation. Yeah.
Yeah, so strange cultural thing. Like it's like this.
Yeah, the same thing's happening all the way up. You know, those seats, George Christensen, for example, some of those booths in the Whit Sundays were, they were red back in the day. And the Whit Sundays at a state level is the only part of the world where a member of the Communist Party has been elected. Like that was Mackay, that kind of part of the world. They elected a communist. There was a Sydney man that came up with some ideas that they all appreciated. But from there, they've flipped, they've gone to George Christensen. I don't think, this is my question to you is, do you think that everyone mythologises how left, the trade union movement was? Because a lot of people like to think the CFMEU are these secret, gentle giants that love gay people and they love migrant communities and they're very progressive. And
it's a massive cultural gap, and I had that massively between me and my old man, who was like old school Labor, and so he was like a president of a branch up in Toowoomba that was ETU. They were really left wing. They campaigned against privatisation, but culturally,
electricians, weren't they?
and like so your ergon workers and that sort of thing. And they
were pretty noisy under Joe, weren't they?
And they were noisy under Bligh. They ended up switching on her, so and campaigning against her. So that was a culture. They were still culturally quite conservative, but they were left wing economically. Yeah. And so I had numerous arguments with my old man, and who was, wasn't completely out there, but like his highest priority was looking after the rights of the workers, increasing pensions, that sort of stuff. Whereas like I was a teenager.
Vote yes, Dad.
Yeah, like I was coming through, this is Cronulla Right sort of time.
Yeah, right.
Last years of the Howard government, and my priorities are like climate change, gay rights, reconciliation. And so the economics for me, because we were still lived pretty humbly when I was a young kid, but by the time I was a teenager, I was going to a private school. So I've got like a completely different, I'm reading books and I've got the internet at my fingertips. So I've got like a completely different world at my fingertips than what my old man did.
Dead Poet Society.
Yeah. That sort of thing. I was working in the summer of the Cronulla riots. I was working in the Bottle at the Burnborough Tavern out in Oakey, which is Ellen Jones's old hometown. And so I've
basically got a hole in the ground now, isn't
it? Because of the mine. But I actually had just got my eyebrows shaved off at a party, the first party that I went to. So I was serving these abattoir workers who were coming off with the, fuck off, we're full type stickers on the car. They got Ellen Jones pumping in and they're just giving me absolute gobfuls. And I've got like novels on David Malouf novels on the counter and stuff. And so they were just absolutely giving it. I had the bell jar on the counter one day, and this old farmer was just I won't repeat what he said, but like it was this real cultural.
Yeah. And those were the Labor voters back then too. They got Kevin in.
Yeah. And so there was just this weird, like this whole thing, and then that was an eye opener for me in terms of like in terms of that, like when you are on somewhere like the Darling Downs, where I think it was like 2 years after that there was like a murder connected to the KKK, and so. Which is pretty out there and like random. I'm not saying that sort of stuff's like happening every week or anything, but like the teacher who helped, who was an accomplice to the teen who shot his brother, was the father of a kid who went to my school, my Catholic school in Toowoomba. And so it sort of did feel like the Deep South in a way.
Yeah. A lot of Saffers moving to Toowoomba too, aren't there?
Yeah, massively.
And
in those years, it felt like something. It was quite eye opening, but then you take that away and you sort of move away and you try and use that to try and understand, because not every those people who are giving me a gobful and calling me a poofter or a faggot or whatever because I'm reading a book, that's not everybody that came through the drive-through. So like it's do
you think it's important, this is I guess we've spoken about all of this today, do you think it's important to have more journalists like you who have been able to work at a drive-through bottle shop out in Oakey? is that important? That is important, surely. And there's not much of that coming through the ranks.
I don't know. Like
there's you and Rick Morton.
Yeah, Rick Morton. He's
from way out.
Yeah. He's
from out here.
He's way out, and then he moved. Once he moved in, he was in the God's country as well, which is like around Burner and stuff. So
beautiful around.
I mean, I didn't study journalism, so I don't really know.
You don't know the pathway.
I don't know the pathway.
Well,
I don't know who's coming through. Like
everyone in journalism knows that going to university to study journalism is a scam. Like there is absolutely no reason why you need to go to university if you want to be a journalist. It's a waste of everyone's
such
fucking.
a long
scam.
degree. It's 4 years.
It's a fucking Ponzi scheme. Tertiary journalism
Why
is.
the fuck do you need to spend 4 years learning how to get drunk and overhear people?
So before I started working with the Monthly, which was completely random, like my editor for my publisher, his brother's the editor of the Monthly, and so that's how it came about. I never would have probably got a look in otherwise.
Yeah.
I got that lucky break. I'd just been running a motel up in Bundaberg for like 2 years, 2.5 years, and so in a weird way, which was just the weirdest fucking experience.
Yeah,
like,
running a motel in Bundy.
Yeah, that like talk about that's on a different level to working in a bottle shop. Yeah. So you just have like prostitutes, meth dealers, meth heads. Like not. I was about to say not every day, but like it was probably nearly every day.
It was a 3-star motel, though.
It was a 3-star motel,
3 stars.
3-star, yeah. It was $95 for a queen suite, $120 for the honeymoon suite.
Ooh. That would sort out a lot of the riffraff.
Well, no, the riffraff would come in and they would... it was always the business reps who were looking for the cheaper deals. It was the riffraff. That's when you were worried when they were looking for the honeymoon suite. They were like, get us that room with the big spa bar. So they were always
the heart-shaped spa bar.
Yeah, they were always trouble. But I honestly reckon running that and that that drove me to the edge of like a nervous breakdown a few times because it was just so. And I never would have done it. I did it.
It sounds like a big.
Oh, my old man had died, so I wouldn't have chosen to do it. But in a weird way, it was like an incredible experience as well in terms of like talking to people, which I'd already done a fair bit growing up because I'd grown up in pubs and in a foster family, so there's always lots of different people around. But yeah, something like that. We've always got to try and synthesize people's lives and information. It was like a really good grounding for going into journalism. And then when you're having like a conversation with someone, and that was really scary at first because I didn't have any training, but after the first few times I'd done interviews, I was like, this is a piece of piss, like, because the stakes compared to the levels of physical threat sometimes that you'd be under at 3 a.m. in the morning when you've got like a meth head beating up another meth head or something. Like it's a completely different level of stakes. So I was just like, this is fine. Like,
it's like your career equivalent of a early morning cold shower.
Yeah.
It's like there's nothing else happening to this day that's going to be tougher than this.
And then you'd look these people up in the paper and it'd be like the Bundaberg Newsmail and they would be like, they'd be in the Bundaberg Newsmail 8 times, arrested with machete, handguns and stuff. And you'd know that they were there.
That's a wild part of the world.
You'd know that they were still in their room. You'd just be like, I wonder who that guy, like, 'cause he seems a bit rough. You'd look him up and you'd be like, oh, I've got to evict this guy. Like, it's like, it's...
Wanted over the disappearance of... Oh, that is... well, that's a great way to get into journalism. I look forward to reading some of your yarns about that chapter of life.
Yeah, no, it was...
But somehow you managed to start to write your first book while you were doing all that shit.
Yeah, I think... Because I'd been studying in Brizzy, and I'd actually just started studying creative writing, which I'd never done. But
was this at Creative Industries, UTS?
No, it was at UQ.
Yeah, right.
So I'd never done it before, and I did a year of it. Yeah, I don't know whether I was really ready for that or got much yet. Like I was still writing fiction. Yeah. Like it wasn't the worst, but it was like really just thinly veiled autobiographical fiction. But it was like the least interesting things about my life because I didn't want to write about all the dark, heavy shit. I just like it was about me. Dating girls, but it was like
bit more Maloof.
I'd change I'd change the name and I'd change make the male character like a bit like better looking or whatever, like than I am, better hung than I am.
But, Lech Blaine fan fiction.
But then once I got to Bundaberg it was like pretty tough because I had my brother up there, but he's got 3 kids, so he had a different life to me, and so
you're the one running in at 2 a.m.
He'd run it previously. He's 120 kilos, so he was a lot better at it than me. But he was off site now, so I didn't have him to sort of like look after me. And so there was just a lot of times where I had like a lot of even with all the work, you get a lot of downtime still, and so it was just, I think, out of like pure like loneliness and like frustration, I was just like started throwing out some of like the hardest, darkest shit that I'd been through, and writing about it in a way that wasn't I wasn't trying to sort of like stylize it too much or change anything around. I was just like, let's just get this out. And that once I did that, I realized that like I'd just been wasting my time trying to write about anything else, because the experiences were way more relatable to not just your creatively minded people, but your everyday people who might not pick up a book otherwise. And that's the sort of like I wanted to connect beyond just like a literary audience.
You've got your book was due to come out later this year, but COVID's obviously bumped a lot of things around. That'll be autobiographical, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's a memoir called Car Crash, a memoir. And
outside of that, we were wondering today with your writing, books, and how, when you're churning out essays the size you are, I'm surprised the memoir hasn't been bumped another 10 years because, I don't know, how long did that Vlandis story take? That took all of lockdown, right?
Yeah, it was like 2.5 months, and I did so many interviews that I never ended up using and stuff, which it's hard not to just be completely obsessed by a subject when you're given that much space. And so... I think that will be the discipline after because there's other books I want to write about the foster care system and about some of my other experiences, and that will be like the discipline as being like, because it's really easy when you're trying to write about hard shit to be like, I'm gonna jump onto a 10,000 word essay about Peter V'landys. It's like the greatest thing in the world because it's like procrastination mixed with like you're following your gut instincts in terms of like newsworthiness and stuff.
It's the same with the Hillsong, right? That's a good mix up. Go down there.
And it's just like sometimes, obviously, especially writers and journalists can be too self-pitying in terms of like, this is because I've got like a sister who works with kids who've got alcohol fetal syndrome and stuff. So I'm like, if I feel stressed, then it's nothing compared to what a lot of people are working with. But when I would finish those articles, like I just feel like absolute, like just feel empty, because you just obsess about this thing for so long, and then you finally put it out, and then you cut all this stuff which you think is integral, and you're never really happy with what you end up putting it out. So I never really like.
There's a crash.
And I've never really been like, I nailed that, like, which is a good way to be in some ways, because that makes you sort of like hungrier to try and get the story down pat.
We don't actually have that with our books because we just steal best articles of the year off the internet, back off it. We Google it and then strip it together and put it in an annual.
There's a bit more work than that. Clancy,
you just crash for all of January.
Yeah, then we got Tim, and we
conveniently here for Christmas. Just jam it into Uncle Tom's fucking Santa sack, and you're done.
Yeah. 10 to 12 emails back and forth for the cover design, but that's the That's the aim, but I'm sure you'll be releasing your book around the same time of the year too, around that October, November.
No, it's April next year.
Okay.
Out for Mother's Day.
Yeah, beauty. Oh, well, we look forward to, mate. We look forward to reading much more of your stuff.
No worries. Yeah, no, it's been a blast.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot.
Lech Blaine on The Tutor Advocate.